Hello. Hopefully you've been doing some work on your research paper. And today what we're gonna talk about is the this idea or the concept of a peer-reviewed source. I'm gonna be following along on the PowerPoint presentation or the slideshow presentation, and these videos are just to augment or help you walk through some of this material. Um, let me see here. So here's the presentation. Peer review sources, what are they, why use them, and how to read them. Okay, because that seems to be a huge issue for students in the research paper is using or what is a peer-reviewed source, how to read them, and like what is going on with them. Well, first of all, we have to identify like why even bother talking about this. Like, why are we talking about peer-reviewed sources? And the reason is it's in the assignment sheet. Oopsie daisy. It's in the assignment sheet. So this is on the first page of the research paper assignment. And what I've done is I put a box where it actually identifies for you that out of the minimum of 4 sources that you need, a minimum of 1 needs to be peer reviewed. And what peer reviewed or scholarly. Now, what a peer reviewed source is it's a if someone refers to this as peer reviewed, it actually refers to the process that you are pretty familiar with. At school, you do peer review of each other's work to make sure that it is effective, to make sure it's accurate, to make sure that it's the best that it can be. And so that's exactly what a peer-reviewed source is as well. It is when authors submit their work to other people who are familiar with their research or the topic that they are researching to review that work. Okay, so when they submit a paper for publication, if that publication demands peer reviews, that publication will send it to other people, other researchers and scholars that are familiar with that area of research. Then those peers, they will actually determine if this is quality research. Okay, so a peer-reviewed source is kind of like a vetting process, or people who know about the material that you are researching and using this source. They are familiar with this as well, and they are telling you this is good stuff. Okay, and my husband and I have a friend of ours that used to do peer review process. She used to be a professor of biology, and she went through the peer review process. Sometime like she was doing research and she would publish it, and she'd have to have it peer reviewed by at least 4 or 5 other random or anonymous reviewers. Now these are all reviewers that have background in this, but it's to make sure that she's not sending it to her friends in that area, in that research, and so they would give her feedback on things that they had concerns with, on how this material is being described, or the research that was perhaps ineffective or unclear. And so the peer review is just saying, this is really good stuff. It is a seal of approval of the research that you are using. So, some students ask like, okay, so what's the big deal? What's the difference between like a commercial article or like a popular magazine or peer-reviewed sources? So this chart here just kind of generally identifies what the typical differences are. Boop. And so if you take a look here, like a popular magazine, that's something a popular magazine is something that you could purchase like in an airport, right? Or at a gas station. Like these are magazines that you can find anywhere, that anyone has access to and that anybody frankly can read. So a reference list means like they have a works cited. Typically, popular magazines don't. If I'm reading Time magazine, they don't have a works cited list. They oftentimes have advertisements or some way to catch your attention to read them, because their audience is the general public. So, like my grandmother, your parents, me, I could pick anything. Like the general public is anybody. Okay, not anyone with this particular background. It's just anybody that's interested. The articles are typically shorter. With popular magazines, they're typically not longer than like 5 pages at most. And they're just general staff writers that are writing the text. That they aren't necessary, like New York Times would be considered something that's more popular. It's not a scholarly source because they just have journalists that are writing this source. So it's not particularly people that are specific or have background on this. The titles are typically same thing, geared towards a general public with like these catchy titles. And then the publisher, meaning the people who actually do the publication or put this out for print, are commercial, meaning they're meant to make money. Okay, so the difference between a popular magazine like Time and a scholarly journal is all of those things. So on this side, all scholarly journals have a list of sources. So they have a works cited page. They have mostly text. They probably have graphics or charts specifically to show off their research. Very few ads, if any at all. The article length is typically longer. Like I would say the shortest academic source that or a scholarly source that you would see would be like maybe 5 pages. They can get upwards of like 30 pages. And that's because the audience is students, professionals, and researchers of that field. So for example, if I'm as a teacher, like I could read an article about teaching that anyone can read, but I might also read an article about specifically intended for teachers of English language arts, so people like me. And so those articles are going to be longer. That's not intended for the general public. The authors, instead of like general staff writers or journalists, these are going to be people who are actually in the field. So, for example, my friend who participated in peer review for biology, she was a professor at the colleges that she worked at. Because she has her PhD, she was a biology professor, but she was also a practitioner. So she was doing research, and so she was publishing her research. So the people who are actively and regularly involved in the educational understanding of this topic. Like I said, the titles or excuse not like I said, the titles are typically long and pretty specific. They're not going to be catchy. They're not going to be things that roll off the tongue and that are fun to say. And the publisher at the bottom there, it says educational institution or professional organization. That means that they're not intended to make money. The whole purpose of a scholarly source is to disseminate information. And so unlike the publisher for a popular magazine where they want to make money, a scholarly journal is intended strictly to get information out. And so this is the general layout or differentiation between commercial sources or popular sources and scholarly journals. Okay.